Hello and welcome to India's World. India and Iran have finally signed an agreement for the development of the strategically important Chabahar port. The Chabahar port is located in the Sistan-Balochistan province of Iran on the country's southeastern coast. Chabahar will give India an alternative access route to Afghanistan and Central Asia, bypassing Pakistan. Pakistan, as we know, does not allow land transit for Indian cargo to Afghanistan and beyond. From Chabahar port, cargo meant for Afghanistan can use the existing Iranian road network up to Zaranj on the border with Afghanistan. Then using the Zaranj-Dilaram road constructed by India and Afghanistan in 2009, the cargo can access Afghanistan's Garland Highway. This would not only establish road access to 5 major cities of Afghanistan, Herat, Kandahar, Kabul, Mazar-e-Sharif and Kunduz, but also further north to Central Asia. To discuss the strategic significance of the Indo-Iranian agreement on Chabahar port, we have with us 3 distinguished experts. We have with us Ambassador Vivek Katju. He is a former secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. He was India's ambassador to Myanmar, Thailand and Afghanistan. He oversaw Iran, Afghanistan and Pakistan desk of the Foreign Office for a record number of 6 years. And we have with us Ambassador Jayant Prasad. He was India's ambassador to Algeria, Nepal and Afghanistan. He was also India's permanent representative to the Conference on Disarmament in Geneva. We're lucky to have with us Brigadier Rumel Dahiya. He is Deputy Director General of IDSA, Institute of Defence Studies and Analysis, a think tank based in New Delhi. He is an expert on defence and security policies and on West Asia. So I welcome you gentlemen to this discussion. Vivek, let me begin with you. India's involvement with Chabahar dates back to 2002-2003. It was in 2003 January that India, Iran and Afghanistan signed an MOU on the development and construction of transit and transport infrastructure, Chabahar, Milak, Zaranj, Dilaram route. The same year, India and Iran also signed an MOU to invest in infrastructure, including the Chabahar port and the Chabahar-Faranj-Bam railway link in order to promote bilateral trade. Now, what has taken India so long to invest in the development of Chabahar port? 12 years surely is a very, very long time.
No, you are right. 12 years is an extraordinarily long time, but there have been good reasons which have prevented purposive movement on this project. For one, it's the US and UN sanctions, which have inhibited companies from investing, from having contacts with Iran of a commercial or economic nature. Not only the specific provisions of the sanctions, but the general atmosphere which was inhibiting such interaction. But more than that, I think there have been problems within Iran itself. We must understand that there are vested interests in Iran, both political as well as economic, that have not really wanted this project to move ahead. The economic interests relate to lobbies that are now taking advantage of the Bandar Abbas port and of the route between Bandar Abbas and Islam Kila and then onwards towards Herat. So that will be impacted if and when this port comes up. But there is also another factor. The tribes who inhabit the Iranian periphery have often been at loggerheads with Tehran. So there has been this power politics within Iran.
Okay. Jayant, so it was purely coincidental then that when we decided to have a strategic partnership with Iran and try and develop Chabahar port, that a lot of other things happened which spoiled the atmosphere. For example, the Iranian uranium enrichment facilities were announced or discovered in 2002. The US was not happy with Iran's growing influence in Iraq. And although the road to Dilaram to Zaranj in Afghanistan was constructed in 2009, by that time you were into a sanctions regime. So it was purely accidental that we couldn't move forward?
No, it was a conjuncture of geopolitical developments in the region and in the world which affected this in a significant way. Yeah. Let there be no mistake, Bharat, about the strategic significance of what we have still to do over there when the sanctions regime ends, and we have to be in readiness for it. But for that, another factor will have to work in our favor, which is some clarity about eventual stabilization of the situation in Afghanistan, because in the early years, Chabahar would be geared specifically for India's connectivity with Afghanistan, with the development of the mining sector, the energy sector there, the development of railways that we have committed to in principle between Hajigak and Chabahar will only come about when Indian investments begin to flow. And so there are a whole other range of issues which are also to be seen and evaluated. So what we are doing now is to try to get the Chabahar port operational by putting a small amount of money, $85 million, to develop a
plus
general
operational
budget
costs
and operational costs, basically to operationalize the two berths.
$100 million ultimately.
Ultimately 100, but this has to be scaled up as and when the requirements, as and when the potential becomes clearly visible.
Okay. Brigadier Dahiya, so do you think the speed with which India can develop Chabahar actually is dependent on the pace of progress in operationalizing the US-Iran nuclear deal and the speed with which sanctions are lifted? Or do you think now the sanctions are behind us and we can move ahead as planned, although it's a difficult road ahead?
You see, irrespective of what the experts would say, my own thinking is that US-Iran relations have definitely impacted our decision.
Will they continue to impact, is what I'm asking you.
I suppose the government has now taken a clear decision that there is likelihood that this nuclear issue will be resolved sooner than later, and that we don't want to be left behind, trying to pick up pieces at the end of the day. Because my feeling is that if Iran can get through to the West, then in their scheme of things, importance of India will go down. So I think the government has now come to a conclusion that this is the right time to make the beginning. Obviously, money that has been now promised is not going to flow in tomorrow. All this will take time, the documentation, the various agreements,
1 year,
practical agreements. And
all within 1 year.
1 year, I think, I would look at it this way, that 1 year is sufficient time for clarity on the nuclear issue.
Yeah, but my question was that how fast we can move on Chabahar is still dependent on US-Iran relations and the sanctions being lifted either at one go or in phases. Would that impact us or not?
Yeah, it will impact it. It will definitely impact us if there's no movement going there and if there is a regression from the talks that are taking place. But I don't think there will be regression because there are compulsions on both sides there.
Okay. Vivek, you want to say something?
No, I think the short answer to your question is yes. There is no doubt that US-Iran relations will have an impact. The question is to what extent. Till now, the sanctions regime prevented any movement. I doubt whether that will be the case henceforth. Because for one, the nuclear deal is most likely going through.
So then why is the US telling various people don't rush into doing deals?
I think the US is only trying to signal, partly because of domestic US reasons, but partly also not to raise hopes, because it will be a mess if something happens to this deal in its final stages.
Okay.
But I think the government here has rightly taken the view that we must be prepared.
Okay.
We must be ready. And since this is going to go through, that is the anticipation of everyone, this will move ahead.
Okay, Jayant, quickly, we are running out of time on this
segment. Just a quick response to your very specific question, whether 1 year is enough or not. It is enough because what we have to do is pretty modest. And unlike India's delivery on other development partnership cases that we have seen in the neighborhood, on port development, we have a good record. We have just developed the port of Sitwe in Myanmar, and that has been completed on schedule.
All right. Okay. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with this discussion in a bit. Don't go away. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are discussing the strategic importance of India investing in Chabahar port in Iran. Brigadier Dahiya, how significant is Chabahar for the Iranians? From the Iranian point of view, if Iran wants to emerge as the main trade and transit hub between Central Asia, South Asia and the Persian Gulf, and do you think Chabahar will ensure that Iran is not constrained by the Straits of Hormuz?
Obviously, the geographic location on Gulf of Oman provides them that opening. They don't have to themselves be constrained by the Strait of Hormuz. That is one part. Also, Chabahar is the only port which gives them access to eastern part of Iran, particularly to Sistan Baluchistan province, which has been under turmoil for quite some time. Also, I think that's the shortest route to Afghanistan, and also going up to Mashhad and then going on to Turkmenistan. So I think Chabahar is very important for Iran itself. And after all, presently they have primarily two petrochemical hubs, let us say. Bandar Imam is one and Asuliya is another. They are developing this into the third major petrochemical hubs. And I think it is extremely important for them strategically and also economically.
Okay. Jayant, what is the strategic importance of Chabahar port from the Indian point of view? Is India's interest in Chabahar only to bypass Pakistan to get to Central Asia? And why is a sea route better than a land route? Is it largely because of the intransigence of Pakistan as of now?
You know, the strategic importance per se is not of Chabahar but of Iran as a whole. Whether we connect to Central Asia and to Russia and to Eurasia through Bandar-e-Abbas or whether we do it through Chabahar is besides the point. We have to actually use every available opportunity to develop alternative facilities by the sea to connect to Eurasia. Otherwise, Pakistan will not give us overland transit. And we have essentially, after 1947, faced a huge strategic handicap in the sense that we are effectively a landlocked country. We don't have any access to Iran and Afghanistan and now Central Asia because of Pakistan's obduracy. And we've had this situation obtaining for 68 years. We don't have access to Russia through China and Tibet in the north. And we don't have access to Southeast Asia because of our own absence of connectivity with the Northeast and through Bangladesh. Because of the Seven Sisters and Assam, they are connected 98% of their territories with the neighboring countries of India and only 2% of its territory is connected with India. So we have a huge bottling up of our border regions, both in the west and the east, and the strategic significance of what we have to do in the future in Chabahar and eventually on the north-south corridor linking Bandar-e-Abbas is self-evident.
Okay. Vivek, would you say that the trade access to Central Asia is the primary incentive for India to invest in Chabahar, besides the greater significance that Jayant has pointed to, and that access to Afghanistan is only secondary? Because if in the long run, even if Afghanistan stabilizes, how big a market is it for Indian goods? It's really Central Asia you're looking at.
I think there's a game in progress. Let us not forget what is happening in Gwadar. To my mind, the development of the Pakistan-China economic corridor, which will begin at Gwadar, will be a game changer strategically and will impact adversely on our interests. Yeah. Now, the development of Chabahar will not address this issue in its entirety, but it will send out a strong signal that we too are willing to play this game of access. So, the importance of Chabahar is for multiple reasons. The access to Afghanistan and beyond to Central Asia is evident. But more than that, to my mind, it's the entire game that will now be played in terms of access for trade flows, for people's flows, for energy flows in this entire region, which is west of India.
Okay. Brigadier Dahiya, while a post-sanctions Iran might be an attractive proposition as a trade corridor to Central Asian markets, would not the fact that the route will pass through a post-NATO Afghanistan create problems? Because post-NATO Afghanistan is going to face turmoil. It's not going to stabilize quickly.
The fact of the matter is that we will be bypassing Pakistan in this case. And Pakistan has been a permanent roadblock as far as we are concerned with regard to our connectivity to Central Asia and also to Afghanistan. And Chabahar, from Chabahar, the Iranians are already making a railway line to Zahedan. And have a promise to make it extend it beyond into Afghanistan, and where we also have a stake there. And once the railway line is extended into Afghanistan and the road to Zaran-Dilaram highway is connected, then I suppose our connectivity issue becomes less problematic.
It still passes through a troubled and unstable Afghanistan.
Well, for going to Central Asia, we don't have to go to Afghanistan. We can have an alternate route.
Exactly.
In fact, the railway line that is proposed from Chabahar to Zahedan to Mashhad will not pass through Afghanistan. Afghanistan will be another sort of route from Zahedan. So I think that will take care.
Okay. Jayant, I think you had pointed out, or perhaps Vivek had, that trade corridor with Chabahar at its heart is not without its problems, because the port and the immediate transportation network has to go through a territory where the Sunni Baloch rebels have been taking on Tehran, and Tehran thinks that Saudi Arabia is using Pakistan as a proxy to foment trouble for it in Sistan, Balochistan. So might we not get into trouble first that the trade corridor itself may be threatened by this kind of insurgency, and secondly, would you get involved in Saudi-Iranian conflict indirectly?
No, I don't think we will get into any such conflict, because I don't think the problem of the security situation there should be magnified. Though it's true that in 2003 itself there was a spectacular attack on Chabahar itself by the Jundullah. But the Jundullah has been on the retreat of late. There have been some incidents sporadically from time to time, and it has been a matter of great contention between the Iranians and the Pakistanis. But the Jundullah leader was liquidated some couple of years ago, and Iran has the upper hand, and Iran is very keen to develop the region also for purposes of showing that they are invested in the region as they are invested in the other Shia-dominated regions. And right now the significance is that if Afghanistan slowly gets on the mend, and if Afghanistan has to be a hub of trade, transportation, energy and minerals, then without the development of Chabahar, that is simply out of the question, so far as India is concerned.
Okay. Vivek?
No, I think you are right. We will have to keep an eye out for what is happening in Afghanistan, because the stability of Afghanistan can't be taken for granted at the moment. Second, there is a possibility, however remote, that the Pakistanis may not be very happy with what is happening in Chabahar, which is in such close proximity to Gwadar. But they will have to be careful, because as I said, a game will have to be played now. And the question is, how much gumption will we have?
Yep.
Because if they try to intervene in the development of this axis, surely the economic corridor is also vulnerable. So there will now be a game of nations. And let's see how each nation plays it.
Okay, all right. We need to take a break again at this point. We'll be back again with this interesting discussion in a bit. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the strategic significance of India investing in Chabahar port in Iran. Jayant, under the new agreement that India's Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust and Kandla Port Trust will enter into with the port authorities in Iran, they will set up a special, a joint venture or a special purpose vehicle to develop the port, and they will take over 2 fully constructed berths in the first phase of Chabahar port for 10 years. And then this could be renewed through mutual agreement. My question to you is, India does this, what does Iran do in return? Because all that we have seen is, it says that Iran will help with the free trade agreement, create a free trade zone around that area, etc. So is there a quid pro quo, and is that enough?
No, we take for granted. We have looked at the blueprints that the Iranians have for the development of Chabahar port, and it's a pretty comprehensive blueprint. We know that they have not been able to implement it in the past because of dearth of money, lack of political will, for the reasons that Vivek wisely pointed out, of competition with entrenched interests in Badr Abbas who don't want the development in Chabahar, etc. There are a variety of factors. But if you look at the blueprint of what the Iranians want to do there, they want to develop the port as an alternative facility which can be ramped up in capacity over a period of the next 10 years. And they are not thinking of just confining it to 2 berths. They are thinking of a much bigger breakwater, many more berths, warehousing facilities, etc., to which they are committed, also to building the railways. Now, for building the railways in Iran, the Iranians are looking for some cooperation, but they are in principle agreeable to funding it themselves. what we referred to just now as the connection from Zahedan to Mashhad and then to Termez in Uzbekistan and to Herat in Afghanistan. But if we are to develop the heartland of Afghanistan, which depends on an imponderable about the future situation in Afghanistan, there the investment will, I'm afraid, have to come from the countries that invest in the mining sector in Afghanistan. So we are going ahead with it with open eyes, and the investment that we have made is a very small investment. It's a modest investment. And if we have to develop Chabahar as the major ingress and a supplement to the north-south corridor, then we may have to invest up to $500 million at some stage.
That's a large figure. But Vivek, when you were in charge, wasn't there a talk of actually leasing the port or parts of the port for 50 years or even 90 years? So why have we settled only on 10 years now?
Well, I can't tell you why we've gone in for the contours of the agreement that have been announced because I'm not aware of.
But is it correct to say earlier we were looking at a 50-year lease and a 90-year lease?
Look, it doesn't matter. To me, it doesn't matter. What matters is our commitment. There is a blueprint now. There is 10 years. We should be willing and ready to invest very substantial amounts of money in this access route because it is clearly in our interest to do so. I take it for granted that Pakistan will not give us access via the land route through the Punjab, not in the foreseeable future. Something miraculous happens, well, that's beyond anyone's imagination. So therefore, if we want to play this game, we should be willing. $500 million Jayant has mentioned. I would think that the figure may be more than this, and it will be worth it because it will transform our strategic landscape very considerably. And that is what we need to do. So beyond the agreement that has been announced today, we've got to see to the future, and not only the near future, but the remote future. Because as a country with global potential, we now have to be in the game itself, and we can't be counting pennies.
Okay. Do you want to add something to this, or can I ask you a different question?
Let's first see as to what's the blueprint as the Iranians have brought out. Presently, there are two terminals they are developing, Shahid Beheshti and Shahid Kalantri terminals. And there are 10 berths, 6 for the cargo and 4 for the containers that they are developing. Ultimately, they are trying to develop 36 of them. 16 of the...
So the 2 berths that India gets are out of these or separate?
Out of Shahid Beheshti terminal.
And one will be a cargo berth and the other one will be a container berth.
That's what it is hoped. Ultimately, they are trying to develop 36 of them. 16 of cargo, 10 of the containers, 3 of dry cargo, and 3 of another 3 for oil. So that is one. But there are 3 major economic parts of it. One is the petrochemical complex, which is coming up about 20 kilometers from Chabahar airport. That is one. There are 28 major factories, this thing, and urea factories and a lot of chemicals, etc. That is one major part. The second is...
And that impacts India because we can import oil and fertilizer cheaply from Chabahar, which takes only 3 days to Bombay.
There has been a talk of establishing a urea factory over there with our assistance and then getting the urea from there like we have done in Oman. Now, besides that is the Chabahar free zone.
But can I take that question to Jayant? Now, this Chabahar free trade zone, India, Iran and Afghanistan already have an agreement on preferential treatment and low tariffs for goods moved through Chabahar port. Now, could this free trade zone idea be used to set up manufacturing facilities to export to Central Asia or extend the agreement that India, Iran and Afghanistan have to Central Asian countries?
I think that's in stage 2. I think stage 1, we should do what Brigadier Dahiya was suggesting, what India is exploring actively, that as soon as Iran is off the sanctions, Indian private and public sector should go to Iran and convert the petroleum asset that they have into, for example, fertilizer. And we import so much fertilizer from overseas. we sustain the international fertilizer industry, it is best that we ourselves become the manufacturer of a commodity that we need every year in and out. So this is something that we should do in the first stage. We should not so much worry about whether we develop a manufacturing hub for access to Central
We are
Asia.
running out of time now. Let me ask you a slightly different question, Vivek. Does Chabahar investment represent a new global thrust by Indian port companies to develop ports elsewhere? Because this was not happening earlier. Now, Kandla and Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust, for example, they are cash surplus companies. There are private companies like Adani's and the GVK Group. They've already set up ports in Australia. So, are we seeing a new thrust along with Chabahar? Yes, Chabahar is important strategically, but here are Indian companies going and setting up ports and port facilities elsewhere.
I would very much like to think so, because it flows from what I had said in the my earlier intervention, that we now need to play this game. We need to develop ports, for instance, along the African eastern seaboard. We need to develop ports elsewhere. We need to acquire ports where we can. And who can but private sector companies and public sector port companies who have a fairly good record lead the way to do this with government support. So, it is a natural evolution of our emerging status.
Well, I hope we set up some more ports even in India, because there are inadequate number of ports on the Indian coast itself.
That's also part of the game.
All right. So, we've run out of time. I would like to thank all of you, Brigadier Dahiya, Ambassador Jayant Prasad, Ambassador Vivek, Katju, for coming here and participating in this discussion. That is all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week as usual. Till then, goodbye and thanks for watching India's World.